In the last episode we went back in time a bit to before the roll cage was built and figured out the wiring for the mandatory kill switch. Now that the roll cage is built, I trimmed and notched the kill switch mounting plate and got it welded into its final position. With the mounting plate welded into place, I could then refit and reconnect the kill switch. As I mentioned in the last episode, all hot terminals needed covering, so with the battery cable connected to the kill switch, I wrapped the exposed terminal in some insulation tape. With the kill switch sorted out, I could then move on to the next job, which was the race numbers. In previous episodes you might have noticed on the side of the car was the numbers 375. Unsurprisingly, as this is a race car, it has to have race numbers, and yet again we have to refer back to our governing body's rulebook, as there are rules and regulations when it comes to how and where you can display your race numbers. The first thing I did was jump onto SOLIDWORKS and draw up our race numbers. Now this might seem a bit over the top, however our rules stipulated that our numbers needed to be a minimum of 12 inches tall. Note it says minimum, so to make sure that we wouldn't fall afoul of this, I made sure ours were 350 mm tall, with a 50mm gap all the way around and 50mm wide black border. You might notice that all the measurements are increments of 50mm, and there is a good reason for that. That's how wide a roll of duct tape is, and as the rules also stipulate that your numbers should either be black on white background or white on a black background, and as we had a white car, it would seem quite simple that I could make our numbers out of black tape. Finally, as your race number is not actually confirmed until you fill in the entry form and pay your entrance fee, there is always the possibility that someone else might beat you to your number, so making it up out of tape meant I could change it easily if I needed to. With the numbers drawn up, I could then lay them out on the side of the car. Now, as I have mentioned in previous episodes, part of our race involves racing at night, so the rules stipulate that your numbers must be illuminated. I laid the numbers out in tape on the door, stuck some 12V LED lights around the perimeter, hooked them up to a car battery, and stood back to take a look at my handiwork. Except it didn't really work. Now, I don't have a photo from when I lit them up at night, however even if I did you wouldn't have seen much. All that happened was that there was a mass of blinding white light and you couldn't read the numbers, meaning I had to come up with a new idea. We need to make a set of backlit light panels to put our race number on, as we will be racing at night, and as per the rules, the numbers must be visible in the dark. I made this, which is a template of the door profile, and I have this, which is an old electrical box. What I'm going to do is put this on the edges like this and scribe around it. Now this is deep enough, but it's not quite long enough, so we are going to have to bend up some pieces and fill in the gaps in the middle. But first thing I'm going to do is cut this lip off and take out the old hinges from the electrical box, and then we can scribe around this and mark it up. With the template clamped in place, I traced round it and was then able to fold the template inside out so that I could mark the other side. I thought flipping the template inside out would create the correct profile for the other end of the light panel, however I did end up making a bit of a mistake here. It turned out that two ends of the light panel required different profiles in order to make it up to the door properly. This wasn't completely wasted work though, as it just ended up being the front half used to make up the passenger side light panel. With everything marked up, it was then just a case of cutting everything out. Last thing I've got to do with this is cut it there and there. Now I'm actually staggering my joint because it'll make it easier to put it back together and lengthen it out. There are rules on the size of numbers that we can have on the door, and unfortunately this isn't long enough. It is just tall enough. It isn't quite as tall as my original design for the numbers, but it's big enough, so it saves me effort of having to modify that. Off camera I cut the frame in half and also the rest of the electrical box into its individual sides. My dad then took each of these side panels and bent up 20mm lips along each edge. This was so that these pieces could be used to extend the first light panel frame and also make up the other sides, as well as one for the roof that was also required. With one side trimmed down to width, I cut the remainder of the electrical cabinet's lock off and then trimmed that side down to width too. To help align the parts for welding, I clamped them to an offcut of the same 100mm by 100mm box section that I used to build the RAM adapter for the tube bender. With the extension piece welded onto the rest of the light panel frame, I marked the length of it and then cut it to length. This cut would also have to be a mitre cut to join up correctly with the new end piece that I'd yet to make. So the other side of the light panel frame also extended, I lined it up on the door of the car and marked where the rear edge would be. I could then make a template of the door in the right place to ensure that the frame mated up to it correctly. With the position known, I taped a pencil to a 1-inch wide piece of timber and used it to trace the profile of the door onto a piece of cardboard to make the necessary template. Like I did for the front template, I made this one so you could turn it inside out, as I would need to do so to make the back of the passenger door light frame as well. With the template made and correctly fitting, I just had to trace round it onto some steel to make the last part of the light panel frame. The end cut out, I just had to miter the ends. Before clamping it into place. And then finally welding it into place. Unfortunately, I was a little late in discovering my poor camera placement, so unfortunately you can't see it. Now, as it was often the case throughout this build, I was working on multiple parts at any one time, so as you can see in the background, my dad and I were partway through the construction of the roll cage when we did this. While I was probably notching tubes and fitting them into the rear of the cage, my dad set about making the diffuser panels that were required for the light panels. Our governing body's rulebook states that you must have numbers visible on both the driver and passenger front doors, and then another either on your bonnet or the roof. Finally, you might notice that the panels my dad is cutting out look clear, and that's because they are cut from some damaged polycarbonate that I scrounged out the skip at work. In order to make them diffuse the light, the plan was to take a DA sander to the back of them. Yes, you can buy diffuser panels, but I was on a budget, so I decided to make my own, or rather I got my dad to. For With the panels cut out, the next job was to mark a load of small holes around the edge of the panel. These would line up with a bunch of holes that had yet to be drilled in the metal frame and would allow the diffuser panel to be bolted in place. With the holes marked, my dad then center punched the light panel. I will point out that the reason he can do this and not just shatter the panel is that they are made from polycarbonate and not acrylic, which is perspex or plexiglass depending where you are in the world. They may look very similar, but they are two different materials and they behave quite differently. With everything marked and center punched, my dad then started to drill all the necessary holes. As you can see off camera, my dad had sanded the back of the polycarbonate panel to give it its frosted look. With that done, he lined it up with the metal frame and began drilling the holes through it. With the hole drilled, my dad used a small M4 nut and bolt to hold it in place. What you saw was my dad drilling and fitting the second of two bolt holes. The first he had already done before I had a chance to set the cameras up. With a bolt in place in the opposite corner, this would hold the polycarbonate in place while he drilled the rest of the holes into the metal frame. With all the holes drilled into the metal frame, my dad then countersunk all of them in the polycarbonate panel so that the bolt heads would sit flush. With all the holes drilled and countersunk, my dad then had the repetitive task of fitting a whole load of M4 countersunk screws, nuts and washers. To ensure that they wouldn't rattle loose as we drove the car around track, I used nylock nuts, not just normal hex ones. With the roll cage finished at this point, I could turn my attention back to the light panels. Now, because of the way the polycarbonate panels were joined to the metal frames, I had to bolt the frames onto the door and roof from within inside the car. In order to do this, I started making up some captive nut plates by cutting out triangles of metal from leftover bits of the electrical box that I'd used to make the rest of the frame. In order to make some captive nut plate, I obviously needed some nuts, so once again I raided the tin of used fasteners, found myself a load of M6 nuts, and set about cleaning them with a wire wheel and a drill. Not only did this clean them, it also helped strip off any coating, making them much nicer to weld to the plates that I just got out and drilled. The nuts cleaned up, I bolted them in place using a countersunk screw to help centralise them in the hole, and set about welding each nut to their respective plates. Because of the curvature of the door skin, these plates could not be welded on parallel to the face of the polycarbonate panel, so I had to take my time to ensure that each of them was welded on at the correct angle. With one done, it was just 3 more to go. The next step involved removing the polycarbonate panel from the frame. You might wonder why I didn't do that before, considering the risk of damaging when welding. A. TIG welders don't produce splatter like a MIG does, so the chances of setting it on fire were already greatly reduced, and B. Having the polycarbonate panel in place helped prevent the frame from warping as I welded it. With the polycarbonate panel removed, I could access the back of the captive nuts as I held the frame in place against the door of the car. This would allow me to mark the position of the holes I needed to drill so I could pass the bolts through from the other side. Somehow it only captured me marking 3 of the 4 holes on camera, but I did mark them all. With the holes marked, I then centre punched the door. I did this while holding a block of wood against the backside so as not just to cave in the door skin.
Don't put your head against the door. Use them.
Then came the nerve-wracking part, drilling a bunch of holes through the door.
Anybody want to buy a rover door? Pristine condition.
With all the holes drilled, I test fitted the frame to the door. You might notice an extra hole towards the top right, and that's because I managed to drill one of them in the wrong place. Fortunately it was covered up by the light panel, and it's also a good job that this is a £395 rover and not a priceless supercar. With it established that the frame fitted correctly to the car, I took it back off ready to paint. Now you may have noticed that I haven't really bothered to paint anything during the build of this car, however the light panels will make up part of the final paint job that the car was going to receive, and it was much easier to paint the light panels off the car than it would be on it and have to mask them up. You will see the final paint scheme in the next episode. Anyway, the first job was to wipe the frame down with some prep cell to remove any contaminants that would prevent the paint from sticking. As usual on this build, I was trying to keep the cost down, so I used a can of Wilkinson's Gloss Black that I had lying around in the cupboard, which I'm guessing I bought back when I used to work for them sometime before 2012. For my non-British viewers, Wilko shut down in 2023. While I was getting on making the light panel for the passenger side and another for the roof in much the same fashion, my dad set about sorting out the wiring. Now believe it or not, I planned this well in advance. Knowing I was going to use some LED strip lights, I knew that the current draw was not going to be very high and therefore I could utilise some now redundant wiring in the car, so back when I stripped it I purposely left the speaker wire in place. What my dad was doing here was removing the speaker wire from the left hand rear speaker and running it to the right hand side. This would give me enough length to get to the roof for the roof panel without having to extend the wires. The light panels on the driver and passenger doors would utilise the door speaker wiring. Another small job my dad did was to strip back the wiring to the boot interior light, as I planned to use a 12-volt feed to it to power a USB socket that could then power a GoPro off in the rear of the car throughout the duration of the race. With my dad rerouting the wiring in the back of the car, the next job was to sort out how we were going to send power to the LEDs. Now if you cast your mind back to the episode when I reinstalled the dash, you might remember that I couldn't put the hazard light and fog light switch back in their original place because of the dash bar and the roll cage. To solve this problem, I planned on making up a panel that would fit where the radio originally did, which would also have the switch that would control the LEDs in them, and also another 12-volt socket that I could power another GoPro in the front of the car. This started with me making a cardboard template of the panel I needed to make. Now, as unfortunately I didn't record it, I will explain how I wired up this panel. The fog light and hazard light switches were easy enough. The existing wiring was long enough, so all I had to do was reroute it. The 12-volt socket was again simple enough, although not quite as easy this time, as the wiring to the original 12-volt socket was too short, and therefore just had to extend it. The wiring to the LEDs though, this was a bit more complicated. However, as I said before, I had actually planned ahead. Each of the front door speakers and the rear left one had originally had two wires going to each of them, so I took one of these wires, joined them together and then connected them all to an earth point. The other three wires I then connected together and joined them to a switch, which we will see in a moment. I then had to connect the other side of the switch to the 12-volt source, and I found an ideal one in the form of the backlight to the interior clock. The Rover and its counterpart Civic both have a digital clock in their dash which is backlit when the side or headlights are switched on. This made an ideal feed up to the LED lights, as it meant that it could only be switched on when the headlights and side lights were turned on, as we would only ever need the race numbers illuminated when the headlights were on. We couldn't accidentally leave the LEDs on, slowly draining the battery. While it would have probably taken a very long time to drain the battery using LEDs, the car was going to take several weeks to ship to its final destination, and I didn't want it to turn up with a dead battery because someone got a bit curious and hit the big red switch in the dashboard. Anyway, with that explanation of how the wiring was done and the cardboard template made, I just needed to make it out something a bit more sturdy. With the template made, I once again raided the skip at work and found a scratched up piece of black alu composite panel. I traced the template around it and then cut it on the bandsaw, which I missed because my GoPro's battery died. With the panel cut out, I then just had to make some holes in it to fit the switches and the 12-volt socket. I have to apologise for a couple of things at this point. The first is for making this part of the video black and white. This was filmed on the very last day I had to work on the car. As you can see, the Rover is visible in the background, and I don't want to give away the paint scheme just yet. You'll have to wait until the next episode to see that. The second is that because this was the last day I could work on the car and there was a lot of stuff still to do, not everything got filmed. Over the previous few days I had gone through my camera batteries faster than I could recharge them all and couldn't wait around for any more of them to charge. Because of that, you won't get to see me fit and wire the light panels up to the car. I am however going to end this episode by showing you what one of them looks like when I tested them at night. Before that though, I want to say if you've enjoyed this episode then please hit that like button and share, it really does help out the channel. If you want to stay up to date on this build, then please hit that subscribe button and remember to turn on notifications. And finally, if you want to see more episodes in this build series, then please click the link that should be on screen now. Once again, thanks for watching.